And I think we've got it. I think we are there. I think the lovely birds, the lovely, lovely birds. I think that's rural background atmosphere, I think is what that is. So, yeah. Let me close all this junk, and we're going to begin recording, so... Actually, no, wait. I am recording. We're going to begin the live stream. Oh, that's a harsh loop. I should fix that. My lovely birds. Okay, what do we got? We've got... We've got to turn on my camera. Oh, there we go. Welcome. So we are going to be doing another recording, another narration. Another narration for Simple History. This one's going to be on the M2 Sherman, or M4 Sherman tank for World War II. And we are going to do start to finish, and I'm going to try to make sure that this one is a little bit more concise, so we can go through and not spend as much time doing a lot of the editing stuff or a lot of the bullshit chatter that I like to do. So, yeah, oh, and chai tea. Look, can you see? Can you see that? Yeah, Daenerys. I can't wait for Game of Thrones to come back on. Okay, so I'm going to come right over here and launch my awesome little browser with my birds. Look at my birds playing in the background. So we're going to minimize this. We're going to put that over there. I'm going to bring this over here. And we're going to find... Oh, see, now I've done it. We've completely lost that. I'm going to go grab my script, because we need a script, huh? Let's go over here. There's my script. Boom. So M4 Sherman tank. We're going to do this. Let's get the chat window up so I can actually see if anybody chats with me. That's awesome. And I'm going to move this over here. Boom. So we're going to have a little dual screen action, so you can at least see me monitoring the waveform, because I like to use the meters down here on the bottom to make sure that I'm not going too crazy. Now, it's just showing you what the birds sound like right now. But let's shut that off. I do like that. I should just keep that on in the background for everything. Let's get rid of that. So we're going to start a new file. We're going to start a new file. We're going to call this the M4 Sherman tank. Or the M4 Sherman medium tank. And we're going to go over some basics. 96, the sample rate. Your sample rate may not be as high as that. That's totally fine. Anywhere between 44.1 and 48,000 is completely normal. Most common is 44.1. Has to do with the type of bit rate that audio tracks will have. The higher you can, I mean, I can do up to 192, but honestly, outside of a movie studio, you're never going to need your sample rate to be that high. So 44.1 is fine. 48 is typically where I go. But for most things, 96,000 hertz sample rate is it's not even needed, but I just do it just to have extra information in the waveform, because that's how many samples it is per second. Just more information. The channel's mono. Most of my audio is recorded in mono. There's really no need to record a voiceover in stereo unless you're doing ASMR or you're doing some other audio production for some reason that needs to be specifically in stereo, music production. It's rare that I'm ever going to record in stereo. And 32 float. 32 float, I'm not even going to begin to get into the details about bit depth, because for most people, try to get as high as you can. So whatever your audio interface says, try to go as high as you can. 32 float allows, I guess, in a shortened explanation, 32 float allows extra headroom at the end of the process in case I have to send it to somebody else, like a mastering engineer. It allows the audio file to be manipulated if I've clipped. But if I've done everything properly and set it up, my gain to the right levels to set it up so I'm not clipping all over the place and getting red lights in front of me. If I've done that properly, there's no need to do anything higher than 24-bit. So if you've got 16-bit or 24-bit, that's completely fine. You would really never notice You're really going to never notice a distinguishable difference between that. Excuse me, I am still getting over my cold from last week. Voice is almost back to normal, and this is the way I normally sound. But I still have a little bit of congestion, which is not too bad. But we mitigate that with some chai tea, homemade vanilla. What is in there? Vanilla and butter with salt. I know. It's good. Good. All right, so we're going to start recording. I'm talking too much. We're going to start recording the M4 Sherman tank for simple history. So let's do it. Let's prime the pumps. I need my clicker, which is over here. That works. All right, and we're going to go for it. And if there's anybody who has any questions, pop them in the chat. I'll get to them. I'll get to them right away. All right, let's arm it. Boom. World War II tech. M4 Sherman, medium tank. Now, M4 Sherman, medium tank. One of the most recognizable tanks from World War II, the Sherman tank, officially known as the medium tank, M4, was built in the USA and used by the U.S. Army, U.S. Marines, and British, Canadian, Soviet, and Free French forces. I love that. Free French. I'm going to leave that. I said it fine, but Free French. That's a little bit of a tongue twister. it's all, I gotta get rid of that. All right, yes. Oh, by the way, I think I said this in the last stream. The dog clicker, that little thing right there, and you can see it there. It puts a little wave. It puts a little spike on my waveform. So that's good. And I can see my gain is running a little hot. I can definitely see that. I don't know if you can see this here. My peaks are just a little too hot. They're between -6 and -3. That's fine, because I am a little bit closer to the mic this time. But that shouldn't affect too much. So, yeah. All right. Look at all this junk I'm going to have to get rid of. But that's the best part about this thing. I know I'm getting rid of all that. All right. Back consummate professional here. All right, let's go. The United States was behind in tank technology at the beginning of World War II, and panic at the German developments and victories in Europe resulted in... Yeah, I got it. The United States was behind in tank technology at the beginning of World War II, and panic at the German developments and victories in Europe resulted in the rushed design of the M3 Lee. The M4 Sherman was named after the famous American Civil War engineer. Where did I get engineer from? Civil engineer. That's where I got that from. All right. The M4 Sherman. The M4 Sherman was named after the famous American Civil War General William T. Sherman. It would be more of a refined design than the M3, which was a stopgap and featured the same lower hull and suspension, but with a new upper hull. The first prototype, known as the T6, debuted in September 1941. The M4 Sherman was first rushed in production. The M4 Sherman was first rushed into production. The M4 Sherman was first rushed in... That wasn't... I didn't do any vocal warm-ups here, so my lips are still a little bit loose or tight. The M4 Sherman was rushed. The M4 Sherman was first rushed into production at the Lima Locomotive Works. At the Lima Locomotive Works factory, intended for the British forces as Lend-Lease. Its upper hull was cast, which meant improved protection and speedier production than the M3. The armor thickness was a maximum of 76 millimeters or 3 inches and had a minimum of 15 millimeters or 0.59 inches. The overall tank weighed 33 tons. I don't know why I emphasize tons, but I'll keep it in there. The tank would have a height and width limitation, a specification ordered by the U.S. Army so that it could be transported on bridges, landing craft, and railroads without any special equipment. Ad lib. This limitation meant that the tracks were narrow, which gave the tank poor mobility in muddy terrain. The Sherman's armament was a 75mm main gun and coaxial 30 cal Browning M1919A4 machine gun in an electric-powered, fully traversing turret. Another 30 cal machine gun was also placed in the hull, and a Browning 50 cal machine gun could be placed on top of the turret for anti-air and anti-personnel defense. The M4 Sherman had a good speed of 35. I don't know how we're going to say that. Yeah, I think we'll replace the dash with 2. The M4 Sherman had a good speed of 35 to 47 kilometers per hour, or 22 to 30 miles per hour, on the road, and a range of 160 to 240 kilometers, or 100 to 150 miles, depending on the variant. One praise from crews of the tank would be the ease of maintenance on the battlefield, especially compared to German tanks. Standardized production variations in the engines and sometimes different upper hulls were identified by its 7 sub-designations: M4, M4A1, M4A2, M4A3, and so forth. The tank carried a crew of 5, including the commander, gunner, loader, driver, and co-driver. I'm going to slow that down a little bit because he usually shows, he usually puts in an animation there that shows the individual act or the crew members in kind of a sequential order. So I'll slow that down. The tank carried a crew of 5, including the commander, gunner, loader, driver, and co-driver. Yeah, my throat. Maybe I need some tea. Maybe that's what that is. That's what that means. Warm tea. Nothing like warm tea. It helps with the vocal noise, which is doing pretty good today because I'm almost back to normal. All right. The first Sherman tanks, maybe not. The first Sherman tanks saw action with the British. The first Sherman tanks saw action with the British at El Alamein, North Africa, in October 1942, and remained a popular tank with the British Army. It would then go on to fight in Italy, Western Europe, and throughout the Pacific Theater. The Sherman found an equal adversary in early versions of the Panzer IV, although it was soon recognized by the German panzer crews that the Sherman was lightly armored. When it went against the new heavily armored German Tiger, or the Panther tanks, the Sherman was no match. These German tanks could knock out a Sherman tank from far distances that exceeded the ranges of the Shermans. These German tanks could knock out a Sherman tank. These German tanks could knock out a Sherman tank from far distances that exceeded the range of the Sherman's. These German tanks could knock out a Sherman tank from far distances that exceeded the range of the Sherman's 75mm gun. Yeah, I think that works. Even at close ranges, the Sherman's gun found it difficult to penetrate the Tiger's armor. Because of American emphasis on mass production, innovations did not catch up with these new German arrivals, so by D-Day, 1944, the Sherman was outclassed. American doctrine also stressed that the Sherman tank was an exploitation vehicle. American doctrine also stressed that the Sherman tank was an exploitation vehicle, not designed to engage in combat with tanks, a role that was supposed to be for specially designed tank destroyers. Tank crews tried to give themselves a fighting chance on the battlefield by adding additional steel plate armor or even sandbags to their Shermans. It would take superior numbers of Shermans to take out one Tiger or Panther tank. That's a little ad lib. I think we'll leave it, but I'm going to redo that line. It would take superior numbers of Shermans to take out a single no, I'll leave. Yeah, I won't ad lib too much on that. Take out one, I think. It would take superior numbers of Shermans to take out one Tiger or Panther tank. One of the problems was figuring out how the Sherman turret could be fitted with a more powerful gun. While some Shermans were fitted with a 76mm gun, such as M4A3 Easy 8. Nope, the. Missing the. While some Shermans were fitted While some Shermans were fitted with a 76-millimeter gun, such as the M4A3 Easy 8, and some of the 105-millimeter howitzer, and some, okay, yeah, that's a comma issue and a the issue. So this is going to be an interesting one. While some Shermans were fitted with a 76-millimeter gun, such as the M4A3 Easy 8, and some, the 105-millimeter howitzer, the true anti-tank answer was the British Sherman Firefly, a modification that fitted a QF 17-pounder gun in the turret. Overall, the use of sheer numbers and combined arms with air support would help the Sherman tank combat its own drawback when taking on the enemy on the battlefield. The M4 Sherman was mass-produced by the American industry at a staggering scale, with 49,234 tanks produced. Many variants were produced beyond its armor and gun upgrades. Including the S flamethrower rocket launcher. Why is the S? I don't know if that's an S is supposed to be in there. Yeah, we'll leave it in there. Including the S flamethrower, rocket launcher, bulldozer blade, amphibious DD, mine flail, and engineer variants. I'll edit that. The Sherman would see action in many post-war conflicts, including the Korean War, the Suez Crisis, the 1948 and 1967 Arab-Israel Wars, and the Vietnam War. And that's all she wrote. So we're going to go in and edit. So I'm going to close that out. Bing. Boom. So that's the whole file. And we're going to go in and do a quick edit here. So most of that crap in there. So what's that? 10 minutes. God, that was 10 minutes of me just blathering. This will get down to like 3, if that. Okay. So we're going to go do a quick edit, and you're going to get the idea. I'm not going to talk too much during this, I hope. Medium tank now. So let me go and throw my monitor up a little bit. M4 Sherman, medium tank. Yeah. So what I like to do here. Yeah, right. So yeah, I was a Kitsu. I think it was supposed to say a flamethrower. Yeah, I think that's right. I think he's probably going to ask me to do a pickup on that, but I guess we can look it up. Let's look it up. That's a good question. Let's look it up online. Let me find Google. Where's my Google? We're going to do that. Let me pull over a Google. And let's take a look. I'm really curious now. Sherman S flamethrower. He's usually pretty good on that, but let's see. S flamethrower variant. How about that? Let's see. Yeah, let's take it out in editing because I don't see any S's in there. Yeah, what a terrifying adaptation that must have been. Just a 40-foot column of flame. Good God. All right, I'm done looking. Yeah, you're right. That's probably supposed to be. All right, so let's edit. All right, let's arm it. Boom. World War II tech. M4 Sherman. So we're going to leave that. We're going to leave this. M4 Sherman. I forgot the most important thing. Room tone. Let's go back to the end. Record some room tone. All right, that works. So that's our room tone. And you can see how much noise, how much background noise there is in this studio. So there's not much. That's pretty low. I mean, the amplitude is, what, negative 57 to 60. I got a little bit of a hum there, but getting that out with noise reduction software, piece of cake. Piece of cake. So let's bring this back up. I do sound like Bob Ross. Happy little tree. One of the most recognizable tanks from World War II, the Sherman tank. I love that free friend. Okay, we'll get rid of that. All right, yes. Oh, by that little, and you can see it there. Okay, yeah. Puts a little wave. It puts a little. That's good. And I can see my game. So yeah. Look at all this junk I'm gonna have back concept. The United States. So yeah, I'm going to get my script up on this screen over here so I can make sure I'm not deleting anything that I shouldn't be deleting. Sherman tank. There it is. Really? I like that icon. What is that? A corgi derp. Gee, I wonder who that is. I think I know who that is. Yes. Yeah, oops. United States was behind. So all of this gone. Look at that. Look at that beautiful edit. And panic at the German developments and victories in Europe. The United States and panic. The United States was behind in tank technology. The United States. The M4 Sherman was named after the famous American Civil War engineer. Where did I get? The M4 Sherman was named. It would be more of a refined design. The M4 Sherman. Yeah, I definitely have. My gain is way too hot, so I should not be that hot. I have more mic proximity, but I shouldn't be that hot, so I'm going to turn my gain down a couple of clicks here. And let's look at. Yeah, there we go. That works. Where did I get engineer from? Civil. I should put the birds on. Should I put the birds on in the background? No. Civil engineer. The M4 Sherman was named after the famous American Civil War General William T. Sherman. So I'm redoing that line because I completely screwed that up. I said American Civil War General William T. Sherman. Civil War General William T. Sherman. Yep, we're going to go back and plug that in as a pickup. So I can normally do an edit right here in the waveform. Let's try to do that. Try to match it. The M4 Sherman. So here's where you got to be precise, because if I just hit record here, I have to make sure that my pronunciation is good and everything is happy, or else I'll go over this existing audio, which normally I do it at the end and pop it in, but let's do it anyway. Let's do this. Let's put this on this window. Bang. So here we go. The M4 Sherman was named after the famous American Civil War General, William T. Sherman. So we nailed that there. So even though the gain's going to be a little bit off, that'll be fine. The M4 Sherman was named after the famous American Civil War General, William T. Sherman. Totally fine. It would be more of a refined design than the M3, which was a stopgap and featured the same lower hull and suspension, but with a new upper hull. The first prototype, known as the T6, debuted in September 1941. The M4 Sherman was first rushed in production. The M4 Sherman was first rushed in the M4 Sherman was first rushed into production at the Lima Locomotive. The M4 at the Lima Locomotive. That's a good one. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I see you over there. I see you. At the Lima Locomotive Works factory, intended for the British forces as Lend-Lease. Maybe this will just calmly put everybody to sleep. I'll just be soothing, happy little waveforms. Its upper hull was cast, which meant improved protection and speedier production than the M3. The armor thickness was a maximum of 76 millimeters or 3 inches and had a minimum of 15 there's definitely a lag there. 0.59
There is
inches.
definitely a lag.
The overall tank weighed 33
It's about,
tons.
stream is, what is gain? So gain is
so if your audio interface, so if you have a USB mic, gain is typically listed right on one of those little knobs on the microphone itself. If you have a USB mic, some of them have it. If not, your gain is set up by, I'll show you this. One of the most important things inside Windows is if you go into your control panels. So start and then go into your sound, not Microsoft Voice Recorder. You want to go into your sound control panels. Inside there, you're going to see recording, playback, speakers, and you can see my audio interface here. If I go to right click and I go properties and you go to levels, this line in, 100% number, that is, even though it doesn't say it here, that's the gain level that your computer sets to any incoming signal like a microphone, which will basically say how hot the signal is going to be. So gain is something that directly affects the amplitude or volume of a sound signal. Most audio interfaces that most people use, that I use here, have very sensitive gain depending on the microphone. This is a condenser microphone, large diaphragm condenser microphone, which needs phantom power to work. So it doesn't require a ton of gain. So you have to find this balance between how much gain to add to the voice signal. So I'm going to do this. We'll do this. We'll do a demo here. So I'm going to turn my gain down. And my voice is going to just disappear. I'm going to turn almost all the way down here. So you're going to start to hear my voice just start to drop out and almost become non-existent as I turn my gain really way down. So it's probably really low now, but it's still there. So as I turn my gain back up, you can hear the volume starting to get a little bit louder. So that's just simply a volume knob which increases signal. So gain is kind of how sensitive it makes the pickup. Yep, pretty much. It is an amplification of the signal from the microphone to the preamplifier that you're using. So the preamplifier may be your computer itself, because every computer has a digital or an analog to digital converter, and the gain simply amplifies that signal so it's louder or quieter. But it's a catch-22. The more gain you have, the more room noise you'll pick up. So you can see when I was doing my room tone, when I was doing this will be a good visual example. Let me zoom in first. Let me zoom in way down here. So you can see all of this noise. So I'm going to be quiet, and you're going to see as this is recording, the little purple fuzz as I reduce my gain will almost turn black. Now, you can barely hear me or see me on the waveform. The gain is too low. It's too low for a usable signal. So typically you want your audio peaks to be no higher than between -12 to -6 dB. And I know that's all lingo and that's all fun stuff, but yeah. So you get the idea. So I'm going to delete all that crap. Be no high. Oh, yes, I do. All right, let's get rid of all that. All right, I'm going to go back to editing. You're welcome. All right. Why emphasize? The tank would have a height and width limitation, a specification. Oh, the mouth noise is coming in. This limitation meant that the track, landing craft, and railroad ad-lib without any special equipment, a specification ordered by the U.S. Army so that it could be transported on bridges, landing craft, and railroads without any special equipment. Ad-lib. This limitation meant that the tracks were narrow, which gave the tank poor mobility in muddy terrain. The Sherman's armament was a 75mm main gun and coaxial 30 cal Browning M1919A4 machine gun in an electric-powered, fully traversing turret. Another 30 cal machine gun, the M4 Sherman had a good speed of the M4 Sherman had a good speed of the M and a range of 101 praise. Standardized production variations in the engines and sometimes different upper hulls were identified by its 7 sub-designations: M4, M4A1. The tank carried the tank crew carried a crew of the tank carried a warm tea. Yeah, warm tea. Actually, yes, it reminds me. I need some warm tea. Good stuff. We're doing pretty good today because I'm almost back. Yes. The first Sherman tanks. The first. Yes. The first Sherman tanks. The first Sherman tanks saw action with the British at El Alamein, North Africa, in October 1942 and remained a popular tank with the British Army. It would then go on to fight in Italy, Western Europe, and throughout the Pacific theater. The Sherman found an equal adversary in
Really? Are
early
you sending me
versions of the
photos?
Panzer IV,
Really?
although it was
Nice,
soon
very nice.
recognized by the
Very
German
nice.
Panzer
I'm
crews.
gonna turn that
The
off while I'm
Sherman
streaming.
was lightly
Oh,
armored.
thank you.
When it went against the new, heavily armored German found an equal adversary in early versions. When it went against these German tanks could knock out a Sherman tank from far. These German tanks that exceeded the range of the Sherman 75. These German tanks could knock out a Sherman tank that exceeded the range that exceeded the range of the Sherman 75mm gun. Even at close ranges, the Sherman's gun found it difficult to penetrate the Tiger's armor. Because of American emphasis on mass production, innovations did not catch up with these new. American doctrine also stressed that American doctrine, huh? Not designed to engage in combat with. Not designed to engage in combat. Tank crews tried to give themselves a fighting chance on the battle. It would take superior numbers. That's a little ad lib. I think I'm gonna. It would take superior numbers of Shermans to take out a single. No, I'll leave. Yeah, I won't ad lib too much on that. It would take superior numbers of Shermans to. One of the problems was figuring out how the Sherman turret. While some Shermans were fitted, such as the M4. While some Shermans were such as the M4A3 Easy 8 and some of the 105mm howitzer while some Shermans were fitted with a
Yeah, boy, I really screwed that whole thing up. Way over here. Let's get that over here.
Such as the M4A3 Easy.
Yep.
And some.
Oh, did I miss something over here? Yes, I did.
While some Shermans, such as the M4A3 Easy 8 and some of the 105. One of the problems. While some Shermans were fitted with a 76mm gun, the 105mm such as the M4. While some Shermans were fitted with a 76mm gun, such as the M4A3. While some Shermans. One of the problems was figuring out how the Sherman
Consult
turret could
my
be fitted
script.
with a more powerful gun. While some Shermans were fitted with a. One of the problems was figuring out how the Sherman turret could be fitted with a more powerful gun. While some Shermans were fitted with a 76mm gun, such as the M4A3 Easy 8, and some, the 105mm howitzer.
Get that pause out of there now, because I'm just going to take it out.
105mm howitzer. The true anti-tank answer was the British Sherman Firefly, a modification that fitted a QF 17-pounder. A modification that fitted a QF 17-pounder gun in the turret. Overall, the use of sheer numbers and combined. The M4 Sherman was mass-produced by the M4 Sherman was mass-produced by the American industry at a staggering scale, with 49,234 tanks produced. Many variants were produced beyond its armor and gun upgrades, including the S. Including the S flamethrower, rocket launcher, bulldozer.
I wonder if I can actually take that out and see if it sounds. Let's take the S out and see what happens.
The flamethrower.
Now, let's redo that whole last line. I'm going to redo that whole entire thing. So let's get into the Sherman would see action in many post-war conflicts.
The Sherman would see action in, including the S3. Many variants were produced.
All right, let's get my script back up here. Oh, I don't want to add. I do not want to add a space to the script. I do not want to do that. Let's do this. Oh, I just heard a train.
Many variants were produced beyond its armor and gun upgrades, including a flamethrower, rocket launcher, bulldozer blade, amphibious DD, mine flail, and engineer variants. I don't know what engineer DD means, but hopefully that means double D, because that would be awesome. And rocket launcher. Yeah, almost clipping there. Almost clipping. Rocket launcher, bulldozer blade. So that means my gain is still a little too hot, but I'm not going to adjust it now. I'll worry about that later. Many variants were produced, including a flamethrower, rocket launcher, bulldozer blade, amphibious DD. I don't know what. Yes, I don't know what. Yeah, I don't know either. The Sherman would, and that's all she wrote. All right, that's all she wrote. Let's. So we got basically a raw track. So I think, as in I always do, I'm going to call this a raw track, and I'm going to save it into my simple history stuff, which we got a lot of crap in there. A lot of stuff in there. Oh, no, I'm sorry. M4 Sherman. And that's where we're going to save it. It's 120 something. So we went down from 10 minutes to 5. I didn't think it was going to be that long. So now comes the fun stuff. So we've already got our room tone. And the first step that I always like to do, I'm going to turn my monitors back up so I can hear my face inside my headphones, is I'm not going to normalize the audio. Normally I would normalize this, but I'm going to apply noise reduction. DD means duplex drive. Oh, really? Somebody has Google. Duplex drive. I'm surprised Dan didn't write that in there, but on abbreviations like that, that would be kind of pointless for me. So let me capture my noise print. So noise reduction, very important, especially when you have any kind of room ambient noises or ambient noise inside of a room that you're trying to get rid of that could color a little bit of the noise. So my noise software here is the stuff in Adobe Audition. Most every software or DAW has a digital audio workstation has noise reduction software. So I'm going to capture that noise print right there. Then I'm going to select the entire file, and I'm not going to do that. I'm going to delete that point because I want a nice straight thing, and I'm going to apply it. And this is the best thing about editing. You can drink while it's processing your audio. You know, I kind of want to say duplex drive. I kind of want to say that. It's got a good sound to it, good ring to it. All right, just survive. Interesting. All right. So now we're going to do some fun stuff. So we're going to clean up most of this audio. So the first thing I'm going to do is run a declicking or a mouth noise issue on this, or a process on this. Can I try and edit what out? Oh, the DD? No, I'll leave it in there. Dan, the writer will typically say, or the producer will typically say, let's redo this line, remove it this, because he doesn't write for spoken word, he writes for script. So the script may sometimes not read properly. And that is an example of something that might just stick out, like DD. He may have to put that on screen in text. It is good information to have. He'll probably, like I said, he'll probably add that in a post production where he'll add on verbal or written descriptions on screen. It's good to have, but I'll leave it up to the director because it ain't me. And I just completely canceled out of that. Let me do that again. Declick information, by the way, or declick process is important for mouth noise for me. Maybe not everybody, since I have heavy cream in that tea. All right. Wow, 41 seconds on this declick process. Yeah, anything over like 2 or 3 minutes, this process goes through and takes a while. So let's get the script going one last time here. Let me close up this thing because we got a second script to do later tonight. But I'm not going to do that one here. Let me close out all my crap. Yeah, versus what it is read and what it sounds like spoken, definitely. Sometimes I run into that, and he allows us the freedom to fix what doesn't sound right or what doesn't come out of our faces right. I had one yesterday for the Sniper, the White Death. That one was tricky because there were a lot of pronunciations and some vocal trickery that I had to get my lips to wrap around. That didn't sound good. To get my voice to wrap around. And the only way I could do it was just by throwing in how it came out of my face, and it sounded much better that way. M4. All right, let me throw my my cans down. 4 Sherman, medium tank. Okay, so declick processes there. We're going to use another process here called dynamics, which is a gate, which is going to remove all of this little dirty purple stuff. And I think I'm going to set it to -67. And that should get rid of most of that junk. It leaves a lot of the background and tail ends of sounds, but it gets rid of some of the background noise, which is good. Oh, no, I'm going to get rid of insert silence. And here's where the fun stuff begins. World War II tech. M4 get rid of that. M4 Sherman, medium tank. Medium tank. One of the most recognized. I'm going to increase the duration here. One of the most recognized. Get rid of that breath. One of the most recognizable tanks from World War II, the Sherman tank, officially known as the medium. So that doesn't fit. Officially known as the medium tank, M4, was built in the USA and used by the U.S. Army, U.S. Marines, and British, Canadian, Soviet. There's a breath there I want to get rid of. Canadian, the U.S. Army, U.S. Marines, and British, Canadian. Yep. And British, Canadian, Soviet, and Free French forces. Okay, so what I'm doing basically is another rough edit to get the tempo down and remove breaths and things that make it a little harder to listen to. The United States was behind in tank technology at the beginning of World War II, and panic at the German developments and victories in Europe resulted in the rushed design of the M3 Lee. Too big of a pause. We're going to close that up a little bit. Lee. The M4 Sherman was named after the famous American Civil War general, William T. Sherman. It would be more of a Sherman. It would be more of a refined design than the M3, which was a stopgap and featured the same. Get rid of that breath, a little distracting, and we're going to cut that duration down. And featured the same lower hull and suspension, but with a new upper. Yep, again, same thing. We're going to get rid of that breath. But with a new upper hull. The first prototype, known as the upper hull. The first prototype, known as the T6, debuted in September 1941. The M4 Sherman was first rushed into production at the Lima Locomotive Works, factory. I'm glad I listened to that because that's a duplicate. At the Lima Locomotive Works into production at the Lima Locomotive Works factory in. Betty Botter bought some butter, but she said this butter's bitter. If I put it in my batter will be bitter, but a bit of better butter will make my batter better. Tongue twisters for the voice actor. Always good to memorize some, because it helps. I'm all out of tea. Intended for the British forces as Lend-Lease. When I was interested, I didn't realize that was Lend-Lease. Its upper hull was cast, which meant improved protection. So that breath completely. Its upper hull was cast, which meant was cast. I'm not sure if I like that read. Its upper hull was cast, which meant improved protection. Yeah, I don't mind that. Which meant improved protection and speedier production than the M3. Irish wristwatch. 76 millimeters. The armor thickness was a maximum of 76 millimeters.
We should just do a stream where it's just tongue twisters
and had
all
a minimum
night.
of 15 millimeters or 0.59 inches. The overall tank weighed 9 inches. The overall tank weighed 33 tons. The tank would have a height and width limitation, a specification ordered by the U.S. Army so that it could be transported on bridges, landing craft, and railroads without any special equipment. This limitation meant that the tracks were narrow, which gave the tank poor mobility in muddy terrain. The Sherman's armament was a 75 millimeter.
Yeah, let's take out that breath.
The Sherman's armament was a 75 millimeter main
Do it.
gun
You want me to?
and
Okay,
coaxial
sure.
30 cal Browning M1919A4 machine gun in an electric powered fully traversing turret. A4 machine gun in an electric-powered
Yeah, let's get rid of that.
machine gun in an electric
Yeah. I don't know if I like that breath. I don't see.
19 A4 machine gun in an electric-powered fully traversing turret. Fully
Look at that mouth noise. Look at that click right there.
fully traversing turret.
All right.
Another 30 cal machine gun was also placed in the hull.
Another breath that seems
Gun
a little
was
bit out of
also
place.
placed in the hull, and a Browning 50 cal machine gun. Another 30 cal machine gun was also placed in the hull, and a Browning 50 cal machine gun could be placed on top of the turret for anti-air and anti-personnel defense. The M4 Sherman had a good speed of 35 to 47.
So here's where I'm going to take the liberty of editing in some silence, because this sounds like a complete, anytime he does
The
specifications.
M4 Sherman had a good air and anti-personnel defense.
There's always a transition scene.
The M4
He
Sherman
edits that
had a
in.
good speed of 35 to
But I like
47
to
kilometers
increase the
per
gap,
hour, or
the
22
duration.
to 30 miles per hour on the road, and a range per hour on the
So on the road, I was a little off, but we'll see
on
if
the
he doesn't
road,
mind that one.
and a range of 160 to 240 kilometers, or 100 to 150 miles, depending on the variant. Depending on the variant.
Works for me.
One praise from crews of the tank would be the ease of maintenance on the battlefield, especially compared to German tanks.
Oh, let's get rid of that last breath. This is how you can tell I'm a poor broadcaster. Breath control. One of the most important things. I have diaphragm control, but breath control is one of
the
those
battlefield, especially compared to German tanks.
one of those tricky things.
Standardized production variations in the engines and sometimes different upper hulls were identified by its 7 sub-designations: M4, M4, M4,
Yeah, definitely get rid of all those.
M4A1, M4A2, M4A3, and so forth.
So what we're going to do is we're going to make all of those durations, all of those spots where I pause and take a breath, even though we got rid of the breath, we're going to make those durations exactly the same. So
Nations, M4, M4A1.
we'll use that one as an example. So I'm going to take this, I'm simply going to copy it, and we're going to delete all the other ones and make them exactly the same length. Just paste them all in there, just like a happy little tree. Just happy little tree. There we go. So tempo should be a little easier.
Nations, M4, M4A1, M4A2, M4A3, and so forth.
Let's actually close that one up a little bit.
And so forth. The tank carried a crew of
So I don't like that pause there.
The tank carried a crew of 5, including the commander, gunner,
Same thing here. We're going to make a tempo here. So we're going to take that.
gunner, loader,
Yeah. And that should be pretty consistent.
The tank carried a crew of 5, including the commander, gunner, loader, driver, and co-driver.
Works for me.
The first Sherman tanks co-driver. The first Sherman tanks saw action with the British at El Alamein, North Africa.
Does the program automatically magnify the sections, or are you editing in small detail? Okay, so yes, so I am controlling all of that. Every time you see this, so this right here, I'm going to zoom out, mouse wheel. Where my cursor is, if I mouse wheel up, zooms into that location. What you're seeing here is the complete. So as I'm editing, or as the playhead is moving through the track, I am zooming in manually to get a closer look. I find that is the easiest thing for me to do. It can be your preference. Most audio workstations have an option to allow the playhead to remain directly in the center, and as you hit play, the track moves along the window. I find that distracting because Adobe Audition does not support 60 frame per second, or a high refresh rate. So what you'll get is a lot of motion blur on the track, and I like to see
the playhead move through the audio file. That's, I would say, an advantage. Once you've been doing it for just years, you need to see
Sherman found
the playhead move along the audio because you need the visual cue to go with what you're hearing. So if you hear something that sounds unusual, where the playhead is, you see something unusual like a mouth click, your ears will miss it, but your ears and eyes together typically spot it right away. And when you're having that rolling playback, here, I'll show you. So if you go into preferences here, I think if you do playback and you do centered auto scrolling in waveform editor, oh God, if I tick that and I hit play,
versions of the Panzer IV,
it does that automatically. And while I can still zoom in,
the Sherman was lightly armored.
there's too much motion blur. You might not be able to pick it up here. I am broadcasting at 60 frames a second, but on my screen with 144 refresh rate, 144 hertz refresh rate, I still see motion
German
blur.
tanks could
So
knock
it's
out a Sherman.
impossible to pick out the fine detail when you're listening for little discrepancies, because I like perfectly clean audio. So that's what that is. So I am definitely going in and out manually, and it's distracting, I can tell.
The
for some
Sherman
people.
found an equal adversary in early versions of the Panzer IV, although it was soon recognized when it went against the new heavily armored German Tiger, or the Panther.
All right, so where was I? This
The
one?
first Sherman tanks saw action with. It would then go on to fight in Italy, Western Europe, and throughout the Pacific theater. The Sherman found an equal adversary in early versions of the Panzer IV, although it was soon recognized by the German panzer crews that the Sherman was lightly armored. When it went against the new heavily armored German Tiger, or the Panther tanks, the Sherman.
Let's get rid of that breath.
When it went against the new heavily armored the Sherman was no match. These German tanks could knock out a Sherman tank from far distances that exceeded the range of the Sherman's 75mm gun. Even at close ranges, the Sherman's gun found it difficult. Even at close ranges, the Sherman's gun found it difficult to penetrate the Tiger's armor. Because of American emphasis on mass production, innovations did not catch up with these new German arrivals, so by D-Day 1944, the Sherman was outclassed. American doctrine also stressed that the Sherman tank was an exploitation vehicle, not designed to engage in combat with.
See, I would normally miss these mouth noises if I had auto scrolling.
A role that was supposed to be for special.
Right here. It's like this little mouth noise. This little section right here. It's just an annoying set of frequencies that if I didn't have
Not designed to
the
engage
visual
in
cue,
combat with tanks.
I would miss
that
it.
was supposed
And then even though most people are not going to hear that,
to be for
since we've got a lot of gamers,
specially designed tank destroyers.
a lot of gamers that are going to be wearing headsets listening
Tank
to this,
crews tried to give them
it's important that the audio is easy to listen to.
destroyers. Tank crews tried to give themselves a fighting chance on the battlefield by adding additional steel plate armor. It would take superior
I like that.
take
Maybe I'll leave that in there.
it would take superior numbers.
No, it doesn't sound right.
It would
doesn't
take
sound right.
superior Shermans. To their Shermans. It would take superior numbers of Shermans to take out one Tiger or Panther tank. One of the problems was figuring out how the Sherman turret could be fitted with a more powerful gun. While some Shermans were fitted with a 76mm gun, such as the M4A3 Easy 8, and some the 105mm,
Count that.
and some the 105mm howitzer. The true anti-tank answer was the British Sherman Firefly, a modification that fitted a QF 17-pounder gun in the turret. Overall, the use of sheer numbers and combined arms with air support would help the Sherman tank combat its own drawback when taking on the enemy on the battlefield. The M4 Sherman was mass-produced by the American industry at a staggering scale, with 49,000. Gonna leave the pause, but take the breath out.
49 at a staggering scale, with 49,234 tanks produced. Many variants were produced beyond its armor and gun upgrades, including a flamethrower,
Here we go.
rocket launcher, bulldozer blade, amphibious DD, mine flail, and
So amphibious, if I take out the DD,
bulldozer blade.
as per chat suggestions,
Amphibious DD,
if I take that out, let's see what it sounds like.
bulldozer blade, amphibious.
Yeah, now see, I would have to re-record it, so screw it. I'll leave it in there.
Blade, amphibious DD, mine flail, and engineer variants.
Yes, that works. All right, so let's edit the tempo here.
Many variants were produced beyond its armor and gun upgrades, including a flamethrower, rocket launcher.
So let's make it a quarter-second pause in between all of those.
Blade, amphibious DD, mine flail, and engineer variants. The Sherman would see action in many post-war conflicts, including the Korean War, the Suez Crisis, the 1948-1960
Way too long of a pause, so let's knock that down.
Korean War, the Suez Crisis, the 1948-1967 Arab-Israel Wars, and the Vietnam War.
So that's the last line. So we don't have any plugs or ads on this particular video. So typically he reuses his ad scripts. So there's no ad script to record here. So what we're going to do now is, now that I've got a clean track, we're going to save that and make sure I just designate it for myself. Clean track, 110 megs, big, but no problem. So what we're going to do now is add our effects layers. And I'm not going to bother to go over all the effects layers. We did that last video, but all this is doing is audio processing. Makes it sparkle, makes it sing a little bit, and gives it some oomph. And then we're going to go through and we'll talk more about plosives. How long is my stream so far? I have no idea. 57 minutes? That's not good. About an hour. We'll talk more about some adjectives that I like to use, or some terms about plosives and transients and sibilants and stuff like that, and what exactly they are when we edit. So I'm going to apply that. That's going to take, that'll probably take on 5 minutes. That'll take about a minute. So let's go over. Oh no, less than a minute. 30 seconds? That's not too bad. But we're gonna go through and edit out. And I'll put it this way: the process that I like to use, or I should say, the workflow that I like to use on most of these narrations, is exactly what you've seen so far, where it's record the script, record some background noise, apply the noise reduction, go in, do a rough edit for tempo, for pacing, and then add in my effects, and then do a final rough edit for sound discrepancies, sound anomalies, things that are harsh to listen to, especially when you're listening to it with headphones. Transient sounds, which we'll discuss now.
World War II tech.
So we talked about this yesterday. Tech, those very high, those what they would call a transient spike, a sound spike, sometimes can be hard to listen to.
World War II tech.
So the tech is what would be considered a
tech.
And the k at the end. So we're going to handle that by fading down.
Tech.
Whoops, and I completely screwed that up.
World War II tech. M4 Sherman, medium tank.
So that one was not too bad, so I don't have to worry about that.
One of the most recognizable tanks from World War II.
It's a big mouth noise there. Didn't get.
From World War II. The Sherman tank, officially known as the medium tank, M4, was built in the U.S.
So
was built in the USA and used in the USA. Built in the U.S.
So we got that click right there.
In the USA and used by the U.
2 breaths back to back. Not good.
And used by the U.S. Army, U.S. Marines, and British, Canadian, Soviet.
So you can hear in between some of those pauses, and you can see on the waveform These little tiny audio spikes. Those are typically mouth noise. Typically.
Canadian, Soviet, and
It's my mouth wants to get ready for the next sound, and there's the mouth noise.
Free French forces. The United States was behind in tank technology at the beginning of World War II, and panic at
Big breath. I'm going to get that out.
panic at the German development.
So panic. Let's talk about plosives. Plosives are something that I don't really have a problem with, but some people do, and it comes with bad mic technique. If you're getting plosives, what plosive stands for or means is the expulsion of air, and it hits the diaphragm, the sensor inside your microphone. If you're on the mic and I go, puh, Peter Piper picked it, it makes the diaphragm vibrate in such a way that it causes an audio spike. The best way to eliminate plosives is to speak off axis. Do not speak directly at the mic. Speak at the mic, but not at the capsule. So the mic is pointed at my face directly at my mouth, and I'm speaking at my script screen. So that is the absolute best way to get rid of plosives.
And panic at the
Panic. If I did panic at the, it's still there, but
panic at the German developments.
because the mic is so sensitive. But the best way to eliminate them is to not even cause them in the first place. But here we're gonna fade that plosive
And
in,
panic at
so it's not
panic at the German developments and
as harsh
the German developments
to listen to.
German developments and victories and panic at the German developments and
So a little bit of mouth noise there.
German developments and victories in Europe result Europe.
There is an audio spike in there
Europe.
somewhere.
Europe.
I think he's right there.
Is in Europe. Result is in Europe.
That was another click in there, but
Europe.
got it. Yep.
Europe resulted in the rushed design of the M3 Lee. Design
A lot of little mouth noises in there, but
design of the M3 Lee. The M4 Sherman was named after the famous American Civil War general, William T. Sherman. William T.
so the T.
William T. Sherman.
Yeah.
William T.
So the T.
William T. Sherman.
Yeah, that works.
It would be more of a refined design than the M3, which was a stopgap. And featured the same stopgap.
So there's a click there.
Stopgap and featured the same lower hull and suspension, but lower hull and
I can see those clicks there.
featured the same
That one.
the same lower hull and suspension, but with a new
Suspension.
hull and suspension, but with a new upper hull. New upper hull.
That sounds
New
all right.
upper hull. The first prototype, known as the T6, debuted in September 1941. The M4 41.
That's a weird mouth noise.
The M4 Sherman was first rushed into production at the Lima Locomotive Works factory, intended for the British.
Lima. I'm surprised.
At the Lima Locomotive.
Yeah. L's.
At the Lima
Locomotive Works.
At the Lima
I should just call this episode the Lima Locomotive Works.
At the Lima
I can't get rid of that click.
At the Lima
He's in there.
At the Lima
He's buried in there.
At the Lima Locomotive Works.
Let's try this little hotspot. See if that'll get rid of it.
At the Lima Locomotive Works factory, intended for the British forces as Lend-Lease.
Yeah, that got rid of it. I should. What? Call it the Lima Locomotive Works? Lima Locomotive Works. I can't do it 3 times.
Its upper hull was cast.
Way too strong.
It was cast, which meant
Even the T at the end of it. Some processing affects
its upper
those
hull
transients.
was cast, which meant improved protection. And speedier production than the M3. The improved protection and speedier production and speedier production than the M3. The armor thickness was a maximum of 76 millimeters or 3 inches and had a minimum of 50
Let's reduce the
and had a
amplitude.
minimum of 15 millimeters or 0.59.
So point. Now I can't hear it, but I know it's there because I can see it on the waveform. This plosive, even it's technically not a plosive because there's not a lot of low frequencies, but P.
0.5, 0.5
Point. It's just by the waveform. It looks too aggressive. So I'm going to go in there and just shape it a little bit.
or 0.59 inches.
Yeah, so
59,
so it sounds a little bit less harsh.
59 inches. 59 inches. 59 inches. The overall tank weighed 30. Overall tank.
Tank sounds all right.
Tank weighed 33 tons.
Tons is a little aggressive.
3 tons. The tank would have a height and
So we'll do amplitude.
the tank would have a height and width limitation, a specification, a specification, a specification ordered by the U.S. Army so that it could be transported on bridges.
So a little bit of a spike there.
That it could be transported so that it could be transported on bridges, landing craft and railroads without any special equipment, roads without any
Couple of
without any
without any
roads without any special equipment.
Yeah, that works. Whoop.
Equipment. This limitation.
Yep.
This limitation.
The rare breath click.
This limitation meant that the tracks were narrow. Meant that the tracks were narrow, which gave the tank poor mobility.
Poor, Jesus. I can control it, but not that well.
Poor mobility in muddy terrain. The Sherman's armament was a 70 Sherman's armament was a 75 millimeter main gun and coaxial 30 cal Browning M1919A4 machine gun in an electric-powered, fully traversing turret.
That's one hell of a
Another
sentence.
30 cal machine gun was also placed in the hull, and a Browning 50 cal machine gun could be placed on top of the turret for anti-air and anti-personnel defense.
How did I get through that whole thing?
The M4 Sherman had a good speed of 35 to 47 kilometers per hour, or 22 to 30 miles per hour, or 22 to 30 miles per
So, yeah, definitely.
2 to 30 miles per hour, 30 miles
So, yeah, big spike there.
to 30 miles per hour on the road, and a range of 160 to 240 kilometers. 40 kilometers, or 100 to 100.
I hate those now. Noises the worst.
Or 100
High frequencies above 10K.
to 150 miles, depending on the variant.
Because my ears don't like to hear above like 15.
One praise from crews of the tank would be the ease of maintenance on the battlefield, especially compared to German tanks. Standardized production variations in the engine.
I'll take that out since there's a long pause.
Standardized production variations in the engines and sometimes different upper hulls were identified by its 7 sub-designations: M4, M4A1, M4A2, M4A3, and so forth. The tank carried a crew of 5, including the commander, gunner, loader, driver, and co-driver.
Big spike on co, so I must have turned my head towards the microphone.
And co-driver. The first Sherman tanks saw action with the British at El Alamein, North Africa.
Couple of clicks. Take care of.
North Africa in October 1942, and remained a popular.
Let's try it without the breath and see.
October 1942, and remained a.
No, I like it. We'll just reduce it.
And remained a popular tank with the British Army. It would then go on to fight in Italy, Western Europe, and throughout in Europe and throughout the Pacific theater. The Sherman found an equal adversary in early versions of the Panzer IV, although it was soon recognized by the German Panzer crews that the Sherman was lightly armored. When it went against the new heavily armored German Tiger, let's take out some of that H. New heavily armored German Tiger.
Yeah, that works.
The new heavily armored,
And a little bit of a
heavily armored,
mouth issue.
heavily armored German Tiger, or the Panther tanks. The Sherman was no match.
That's a little aggressive there on the match.
Was no match.
Very aggressive. Let's take the amplitude down a little bit. And I'm going to actually take out the match. So that is a sibilant sound, anything like S or F. That
was no match. Was no match. These German tanks could knock out a Sherman tank from far distances that exceeded the range of the Sherman's 75mm gun. Even at close ranges.
Close.
Even at close.
So yeah, there's a little bit of room noise in there. So that was so loud, that spike so loud that it picked up echoes from...
Even at close ranges, the Sherman's gun found it difficult to penetrate...
From the studio.
Difficult to penetrate the Tiger's armor. Penetrate the Tiger...
So Tiger.
The Tiger's armor. The Tiger's armor. Penetrate the Tiger's armor.
A little bit of a mouth noise that's distracting.
The Tiger's armor. To penetrate the Tiger's...
Oh, I see him right there.
Tiger's armor. Because of American emphasis on mass production, innovations did not...
This pause is a little bit too...
Tiger's armor. Because of American emphasis on mass production, innovations did not catch up with these new German arrivals. So by D-Day, 1944, the Sherman was out...
Knock that breath down just a little bit.
The Sherman was outclassed. American classed. Sherman was outclassed. American doctrine also stressed that...
It sounds like I'm almost saying America doctrine.
American doctrine also stressed that...
We'll leave it in there.
Also stressed that the Sherman tank was an exploitation vehicle, not designed to engage. Sherman tank was an exploitation vehicle, not designed...
Shorten that up a little bit.
Not designed to engage in combat with tanks. A role that was supposed to be for specially designed tank destroyers.
Clean that up.
Designed tank destroyers. Tank crews tried to give themselves...
A little bit too loud there. I'll bring
Tank crews tried to give themselves a fighting chance on the...
Ooh, lots of crap. Lots of crap in there.
Tried to give themselves a fight.
Lots of junk.
Themselves a fighting...
We'll clean that out. So...
A fighting chance on the battlefield by adding additional... Tank crews tried to give themselves a fighting chance on the battlefield by...
A lot of visual.
Chance on the battlefield by adding additional steel plate armor. Steel plate armor. Or even sandbags to their Shermans. It would take superior numbers of Shermans to take out one Tiger or Panther tank. Tiger or Panther tank. Take out one Tiger or Panther tank. One of the problems was figuring out how the Sherman turret could be fitted with a more powerful gun. While some Shermans were fitted with a 76mm gun, such as the M4A3 Easy 8, and some, the 105mm howitzer, the true anti-tank answer was the British Sherman Firefly, So yeah, if, let's say, eagle-eared listeners will hear F, when you're saying the word F, or at least with me, sometimes you'll get a harmonic sound, a frequency, which is like a buzz, where your teeth will go onto your lips and it creates a little bit of a high-frequency tone with harmonics. And it's like your lips want to make a sound that's close to a buzz. Answer was the British Sherman Firefly. So right in here, we're going to get rid of it. Sherman Firefly. This little squeak. It's a squeak. That. Sherman Firefly. It's a minor thing. British Sherman Firefly. And most people won't notice it, but I hear it, and it annoys the hell out of me. So how do you get rid of it? You're going to see it here. So these little bands are the harmonics. So here's the root frequency down here, which is what? 250 hertz, and then you can see a harmonic at 500, then it goes up to 1K, then 1, 5, 2, and all these little bands. And fire. Oh, let me go back. And you're going to hear it in all its glory. That little noise. So auto healing fire reduces it, which is good, but it doesn't eliminate it. So in order to eliminate it, you go into that section and insert silence and fire. And it gets Sherman Firefly. It gets completely rid of that. A modification that Sherman Firefly. That frequency, which is good. It's a squeak, and most people are not going to notice, but it does contribute to Firefly. A listening thing. Oh, caught it. Oh, now that you have headphones on. Oh, that's good. So yeah, you can definitely hear it. You're going to have to listen to the rest of the mouth noise. Tank answer was the British Sherman Firefly. A modification. So definitely some mouth noise there. A modification that fitted a QF 17-pounder gun in the turret. Overall, the use of sheer numbers and this sibilance did not get, for some reason my software missed it, did not take sheer down. It's very harsh to listen to. That's just uncomfortable to listen to. Overall, the use of sheer numbers. Yeah, too grating to my ears, so I'm going to reduce that. So with sibilance, since the waveform is just, it's consistent, it shouldn't technically look flat. It should be like almost like a pill shape. We can get rid of a lot of the spikes. We just go in there and delete it. Just delete them all. Not only that, but you can actually just reduce the amplitude of the entire thing to help soften that sibilance. Overall, the use of sheer numbers and combined arms with air support would help the Sherman tank combat its own drawback. Get some mouth noise in there. Let me up my spectral. Spectral is more important in the editing process for me. Combat its own drawback, because it's where you see all the little dirt. Combat its own drawback when taking on the enemy on the battlefield. And one thing I didn't say earlier, mouth noise on the battlefield. There's a trend in a lot of broadcast news, especially public radio, NPR. You hear this on a lot of cable news. When taking on the enemy on the battlefield, they typically produce or process sound live, and they'll have compressors and gates and things to bass enhancers and treble enhancers and a whole bunch of other crap live. They process audio effects. There's some tendencies on broadcast news, especially on radio, to not process out a lot of the mouth noise, meaning to reduce certain mouth noise frequencies. It adds a sense of, at least for me, it adds a sense of realism. Bottom bit looks like marbling in good bacon. Yes, that's true. Needs more fat. When taking up. But a lot of that newer broadcast standard not only has that effect
not eliminated, meaning that sort of feature of having a wet sound to your voice. So I don't take out everything
when taking on the enemy on the battlefield.
because it does create a sense of, well, obviously moisture, but it does create a sense of intimacy with the listener. So it's something that I like to leave in and not completely clean out.
The M4 Sherman was mass-produced.
A little low click there.
The M4 Sherman.
You're a human, not a robot. It's true. I am not a robot.
The M4 Sherman was mass-produced by the American industry at a staggering scale, with 49,234. 49,000.
That one right there.
49,000.
Can't get it. Come on, get it.
With 49,234 tanks.
So there's a root noise, and then the higher wet sound. The higher wet sound is up here, up higher than 10K. This little section in here. That little noise is the sound I'm referring to, where you leave that in because it creates a sense of presence.
9,234 tanks produced. Many variants were produced beyond its armor and gun upgrades, including a flamethrower, rocket launcher,
So even with flamethrower.
including a flamethrower.
So that root one is right there.
A flamethrower, rocket launcher, bulldozer blade, amphibious DD, mine flail, and engineer.
Couple of, yep, right there.
Flail, and engineer variants. The Sherman would see action in many post-war conflicts, including the Korean War,
A little bit harsh.
including the Korean War, the Suez Crisis, the 1948-1967 Arab-Israel Wars,
And that's it.
an Arab-Israel War.
Now see, now here,
An Arab-Israel.
oh, wow. So we have a vocal fricative. A vocal fricative.
The 1948-1967 Arab-Israel.
So this little right here. That sounds funny.
Israel.
That's the B.
An Arab.
Arab. That was because I'm lazy and my mouth didn't want to open for the next word. Auto heal won't get rid of all of that, but minimizing it is good.
Arab-Israel Wars and Israel Wars and the Vietnam and the Vietnam War.
That's it. That's all she wrote.
Variants.
So, one last process. So since we've cleaned all of this, we're going to save as final. And that's pretty much our final track. So one last process we're going to do is, we didn't do this last. All right, so I'm human. Sounds a little under tongue pocket. Yeah, under tongue pocket. That is bacon. It is probably an air pocket that might have come from underneath my tongue. And every now and then you'll catch them. But for some reason, when I hear them, I have to get rid of them. I can't not take them out. But what we're going to do here is one last processing trick. And this is for YouTubers. This is something I traditionally do on most audio. It's called match loudness. There are certain loudness standards for audio on all platforms. It's called the Lufs scale. I think that's loudness units. And then there's some, I can't remember exactly what the FS is, but it's a loudness unit scale that audio industry has adopted as a standard. YouTube, when you upload, if I maximized this thing out to the just max where it was clipping and it was, positive decibels, YouTube will normalize that audio, which just simply means to make everything, the peaks to normalize to a certain amount. It will normalize everything to minus 14 loudness units. Now, when I run that process on this audio, so this is where I normally keep my audio. I keep it pretty much normalized to negative 1 dB. Let's run that process now. So negative 1 dB. And then you'll see the audio waveform not change too much because most of it is already normalized to negative 1 dB, which is way up here. I don't know if you can see it, but that's 0 dB up at the top here, this line up here. And nothing pretty much gets to 0, which is good, which is what you want to see. When I run match loudness settings, when I take this track and I drag it into there and I run it, you're going to see what
YouTube loudness is going to look like. So you can see it flattens everything out. It takes everything and compresses it down and makes it so it's much more uniform and gets rid of a lot of those spikes. This can be handy if you're handing it off to somebody who is producing something specifically for YouTube, which Dan does. So I like to run that process from time to time on certain tracks. World War II tech, M4 Sherman, medium tank. It gives it a sense of presence. One of the most. Does it degrade the quality in any way? It depends on your definition of the word quality. That's a tough question. If you asked, I remember just asking audio engineers on a Reddit forum about this, audio engineering forum, about waveform transients. A transient or I should say about dynamics, a dynamic range, a dynamic sounding vocal track. If somebody looked at this, you see how I zoom out and everything is razor sharp? There are complete, just straight edges. That would be considered an overcompressed track. This one area here is more quote unquote dynamic simply because I have lower, where I'm speaking lowly, and I have more emphasis on certain words, and then I get louder and I talk louder. So there's more dynamic range in it. It's not necessarily quality, it's your perception of the sound. Most modern music has been overcompressed and overprocessed to sort of eliminate dynamic range, and volume is king. Where volume, weirdly, the human ears hear volume as the more volume something has, the better it sounds. And that's not necessarily true. So you run this weird line of, are you an audiophile? If you're an audiophile, you want a dynamic track. You want a dynamic range to the performance. And when you zoom in, there is some dynamic range to this. But when you zoom out, you can see it's obviously been processed. So World War II tech. It sounds fine. I'm going to undo it and leave it more dynamic. So you can see here, definitely, it's not an even track. There are some lows. Audiophile in the house. Yes, true. So it's your subjective opinion of quality. I personally like a dynamic track. I like to see spikes because that captures the performance, especially when somebody's doing voice acting or voice performance. You want to capture their personality, and the best way to do that is with the natural dynamic range of their enunciation and pronunciation. That is the absolute best way to do it, at least in my opinion. You talk to an audio engineer or somebody who's producing music, they would look at this and they go, you got spikes everywhere. Why don't we normalize it and actually get it out where it's at a consistent level? But like I said, YouTube does it on its own. It processes audio in its own way. So if I was over this amount, if I was louder than this, which I'm not, I'm at -1 dB, which is totally fine. YouTube's not going to chop a lot off. It's not going to compress it overly. So it sounds a little bit more natural. So the last thing M4 Sherman. The last thing we're going to do is add a high pass filter, which is going to get rid of, I'm going to zoom into it. I think we did this last time. All these little spikes down here in the low sub frequencies, frequencies below 40 hertz, which if you're a bass enthusiast, which I am, you won't be able to hear any of this stuff. Let's zoom in and see if you can hear any of it. Most people can't. They're thumps. These would be thumps. If you have a room sub, you'd hear boom, boom. You can even see that one on the waveform, which means its amplitude is pretty high. Let's see. Oh, you can't even hear it. So we're going to get rid of it, though, only because that can create artifacts. That can degrade quality. When you've got frequencies that are that low, the normalization process, I believe the ITU standard, I believe the normalization process will not get rid of, I think, something around 40 plus. I think it gets rid of everything below 40, I believe. And then if you leave anything, any sub bass in there, it will actually augment or throw extra bass in, which I do not want. I have enough bass. I don't need any more. In fact, I rolled off 80 hertz. It's very common to produce audio with a bass roll-off. It adds clarity. It adds presence to the voice. It doesn't distract you with that radio booming announcer voice. Actually, let's speak of radio announcer booming voice. Let's do a quick demo. One of the most recognizable tanks from World War II. We're going to go to a deep bass part at the end.
This one?
Many variants were produced beyond its armor and gun upgrades.
That. So we're going to see what that sounds like if I was a radio announcer, because they use a very special compression. They use a multiband compressor and broadcast.
Many variants were produced beyond its armor and gun upgrades. Many variants were produced beyond its armor and gun upgrades.
Way too sharp, way too loud.
Many variants were produced beyond its armor and gun upgrades.
So while some people like that sound, it sounds too harsh, too sibilant, and too compressed to actually, for anybody who wants to enjoy their audio. So that's it. That's all we're going to do. We're going to save this track. We're going to export as an MP3, and that's all she wrote. Save it. A roll-off. Oh, I just spoke right into the mic, and I probably just shat the diaphragm in there. A roll-off. I'm going to show you what a roll-off is. Let me save it. A frequency roll-off is what's commonly referred to, or most commonly, is a high-pass or a low-pass filter. Now, I'm going to show you in equalization, filter and EQ, there's a whole bunch of different types of equalization. For the most part, parametric equalizer is very common when you're producing audio. You can use a graphic equalizer. Everybody knows what those look like, where you can adjust certain bands, and everybody's got their favorite presets. Even I have presets in here.
World War II tech. M4 Sherman.
And it affects the sound in a very, very obvious way. A parametric equalizer is something that is a little bit more subtle and allows gradients or smoothing hills, which is why I say roll-off. So you can see here, this is a frequency
medium tank.
So this is all the frequencies.
One of the most recognizable tanks from World War II.
Voice. And you can see
Sherman tank.
The amplitude, right, and the amount of frequencies. So if you look here, from negative or 30 hertz to 100 hertz, I have a lot of shit, all the way up to 200. There's a lot of frequencies in my low range, and you can even see it down here on a frequency analysis. A roll-off, if I do what is called a high pass, simply rolls off the frequencies below a certain range. So
officially known as the medium.
It reduces the amplitude of low frequencies. So a high pass reduces low frequencies. A low pass reduces high frequencies. So if I see HP for high pass, LP for low pass, it does the same thing. It reduces in amplitude high frequencies above a certain range. And for the most part, MP3, the MP3 file format, has a the encoding process that MP3s use, I think rolls off everything above 16,500 hertz, I believe. So any frequencies that live in that range are totally useless. They're completely cut off. Most people can't hear them. Infants can hear 20,000 hertz, 22,000 hertz. Most people above the age of 25, they might max out at 18,000 hertz. And even then, those frequencies are just high-pitched tones. So a roll-off helps eliminate those things, because even though you might not be able to directly hear it, it influences the sound. It influences the presence, or more commonly, if you're doing a low pass, or I should say a high pass filter, reducing low frequencies will definitely reduce what they call mud. So a deep voice like I have, there's a lot of low frequencies, a lot of low harmonics. It can be muddy to listen to sometimes. So if you get rid of those, it's beneficial. So that's what a roll-off is. I'm rolling off certain frequencies that I don't want to hear by a certain amplitude. So it kind of gets rid of the superfluous sounds, muddying up the clarity. They're not superfluous per se. They are just, they're transparent. They're not superfluous. They add volume to the sound, which is why I typically like to leave a lot of low frequencies in. I roll off, well, here, I'll show you. My roll-off, my high-pass roll-off is at 60 hertz. So that means at 60 hertz, this parametric equalizer will start rolling down the frequencies. So where by the time it gets down to 50 hertz, it's reduced it in amplitude by 15 decibels. That's not aggressive. 60 hertz is considered a little low. I like to amplify, since I'm dealing with gamers. We're producing content for gamers. Gamers are typically listening on bassy headphones, and they've got bassy sound systems, and they just like to crank the bass and shit. Who doesn't? I like to leave in some of those low frequencies because it adds impact and punch. Producers, I'll give you an example. Producers who are on, I remember listening to a podcast,
NPR, National Public Radio, I believe, has a frequency cutoff of, I think the podcast says he was up near 100 plus hertz, 120 hertz, something like that. So I'm going to show you what it would sound like if I were to be broadcasting this on NPR. So you can see all these low frequencies are gone. This is what it would sound like.
World War II tech. M4 Sherman. Medium tank.
Now that is totally,
One of the most recognizable tanks from World War II. The
totally
Sherman
tinny.
tank, officially known as the medium.
Totally tinny. There's no presence to it. And that's, when I say presence, I mean bass. I mean impact, something that's there, those frequencies that we don't have. Yeah, it does sound kind of hollow. Most radio stations, well, I would say AM radio stations, will cut off those frequencies simply for clarity. And their reasoning is fantastic, because you're driving in a car, you're listening to your radio, you've got road noise, road hum from the wheels is around 60 to 80 hertz. Why muddy it up even more with somebody's voice? So that's why they roll it off.
One of the most recognized.
So that just sounds terrible to me. So I will never, ever roll off that high, ever, unless somebody requested it.
World War II tech. M4 Sherman. Medium tank.
Yeah. So I'm going to totally take that off. That does not sound happy.
One of the most recognizable tanks from World War II. The Sherman.
Yeah. Not happy. So, I didn't want to add multi-band compressor.
World War II tech. M4 Sherman. Medium tank.
Yeah. Also, I would say we're running at about an 8 to 10 second delay. Yes, that's definitely true. That's Twitch. That is Twitch's delay. That's typically, that's common on Twitch. I don't think I can shorten it up, only because I'm running at, I think my bandwidth out is 5 megs a second. So I'm uploading at 5 megs a second so I can maintain 60 frames a second. So that's pretty much, that's common on most Twitches. I would say, what, 5 plus seconds, 5 to 10 seconds. So yeah, that's pretty common. All right, so we are going to export this. So stream is coming to an end. I am going to make sure I save this as an MP3. So, one last thing. Metadata. This is something I've discovered. Add metadata to your tracks. Whoever's listening to this, add metadata. Metadata hard encodes credits. So if you're the author of something, if you are the composer of something, add metadata into your files. So, and this is the title of this, and that way, anytime I export it to anybody, it automatically has the title, the track. You upload it somewhere, it's got that information. You upload it to YouTube, it pulls the metadata and actually uses that as, so you don't have to type everything out. And plus, you can put keywords in there. It's fantastic. So my metadata is very simple. Simple history, Chris Kane. The composer, I usually put who is the writer or the script writer. So they're the composer of it. And it was usually remixed by me since I'm the audio producer. Copyrights, if you have copyrighted audio, you can put it in there, but typically it will start with a year. And then the who owns the copyright. So this would be particularly year 2018, simple history. And they pretty much own it after I send it to them. And you can have a URL. I usually update that when the audio is live on YouTube. I stick in the YouTube URL there. So that's it. So I'm going to save that, and we'll just call this voiceover as its genre, because that's what it is. So let me save it as MP3. Yep. So 11 megs. So that was 5 minutes. 5 minutes for tracks for 11 megs, which is not too bad. And that's a high quality MP3. Most people who can't encode at 48,000 hertz or 320 kilobits per second, most people will go to a 190 something. Podcasts will do 128 sometimes. I like to give a high quality MP3 as the final output. So that's it. So everybody, I would like to thank for watching the video today. This was a long one. How long were we doing this for? Hour and 40 minutes. Holy shit. So I'll be doing this again tomorrow night. So feel free to join in, and we will go through the wonderful world of audio editing. And to the viewers that watched me on stream, thank you. Thank you very much for sticking around all evening. This was good. So enjoy the rest of your night, guys. That's it.